Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of my podcast, Soul Talk and Psychic Advice. Today, we're going to discuss something that is essential for sensitive people. Whether you call yourself empath, clairvoyant, or highly sensitive or intuitive, this message is for you. Let's talk about energetic boundaries. I've talked about people pleasing, overgiving, in many different ways, but this is for people in everyday life who are sensitive to be able to show up and not be overwhelmed, because a lot of times us who are highly sensitive, we end up becoming introverts over time because being extroverted is too much or is too peoply everywhere, and you can't constantly avoid situations and crowds and experiences and meeting new people because you're missing out on life. And so this episode is for you. Many people who are intuitive notice that they feel deeply affected by environments and relationships. You may notice that you feel drained after certain conversations. That happens. And, sometimes it's unfair. We just call the other person toxic. And that's not fair. It's not necessarily that the other person is toxic. Maybe in some cases, it's just that our energy is overloaded and we can only take so much. And so the other person may not necessarily be toxic. It's just that we have reached our capacity and feeling overwhelmed in crowded places. Well, what's crowded? The grocery store, theme parks, yeah, concerts, many places that we go to. It's very rare that you could go out in public unless you live in a town where there aren't that many people and not be overwhelmed by the population size. It's just how it is. There is going to be crowded places and you can't avoid everything because you won't live your life. And a lot of times we do this, well, it's just too crowded, I won't go. But tomorrow's not promised, as we know, and time is passing by, so do you want to keep on avoiding? You don't want to keep on avoiding crowds. I love the festivals. I love Disneyland. Disneyland gets packed, even with reservations. And I didn't want to miss out on these things. I love the energy of a concert or a Broadway show. And I said, I don't want to miss out on these things. So I found ways not to miss out on it, which I will get to. And feeling affected by other people's emotions. That happens, but you have to have discernment. You have to know if they're triggering you, if they're projecting onto you, or is something coming up for you, right? The triggers. Why are you affected by other people's emotions? A lot of people just go, well, I'm an empath. Yes, you're an empath, but it's bigger than that, right? Just being an empath is so much more. You can't just say I'm an empath and excuse everything because you're not getting to the core of stuff. And I see that all the time. I see all the posts. Well, don't you just feel it all? Being an empath, yes, you feel it all, but how does it affect you personally? What are the triggers for you? And needing more recovery time after social interaction, been there. And you can only do so much of that too because you have to work. You can't just like say, I'm gonna stay home, relax, and stare at the walls. Even if you work at home, you still have to get up and work. You have to interact with your family. If you have kids, you can't avoid life. And feeling responsible for helping others feel better. My God, uh, I've done my share. And for those of you who do this, you're doing it at your own expense, right? And it's because as empaths, we're like, if everybody else is happy, then I be happy. That's what this is about. And, it's trying to keep the energy good around you. And you can't really do that. And feeling impacted by tension even when nothing is spoken. It's a hard way to live, and we're not martyrs. We're still human beings who are entitled to a great life. You do not have to be sacrificed because you're highly sensitive. It isn't just the burden that you must pay. So, without boundaries, increased sensitivity can feel exhausting. And my mission in life is to keep people grounded, keep people regulated while they're feeling all these things, showing them how to do that. That's my mission in life. My nervous system regulation for highly sensitive people is my calling. But intuitive ability does not require absorbing everything around you. You can remain open while also feeling protected. Today, we will explore why sensitive people often need strong boundaries, the difference between empathy and emotional absorption. Got to know the difference. How boundaries support intuitive clarity, how to remain compassionate without becoming overwhelmed, and practical ways to create energetic stability. Boundaries do not block intuition. Boundaries support intuition. And it makes it easier, makes you a clearer channel, and you're able to filter better. So boundaries are a good thing. So let's talk about how sensitivity does not mean you must absorb everything. That isn't what it's about. Many sensitive people learn to focus on other people's emotional states, sometimes from a young age. Especially if you had to walk on eggshells or be the fixer as a kid, you took on adult responsibilities. You learned this early in life. You may have learned at a young age to anticipate the needs of adults, and sadly, a lot of adults make children responsible for how they're feeling. You've noticed tension because you probably lived with it, adapted your behavior to survive. Monitor emotional environments. That's tough, but some people go home to some rough environments. You've learned to keep the peace. And you will do that in your friendships and romantic relationships, and you just take on that role. And it'll continue and continue. And where you want to bring peace, you don't want to be the only one responsible for keeping the peace and avoiding conflict. When people say, I hate confrontation, there's a reason why. It's not because they're weak or fragile, it's because they probably grew up with it and they don't want to deal with it no more. Sometimes you just don't want to deal with certain things anymore. And you're just like, oh, confrontation is toxic. And I notice for myself, if I find that people have chaos or confrontation in any way, I just tell them, look, at this stage of my life, it doesn't work for me. I used to be able to put up with more, but it doesn't work for me anymore to be around people like that. But these skills can increase intuitive perception. All these things, adapting, survival, noticing tension, etc. But they can also create emotional fatigue, especially if boundaries are unclear. Empathy allows you to understand how someone feels. Absorption causes you to carry what someone feels. Empathy supports connection. Absorption can create exhaustion. Yes, boundaries allow empathy without overload. You can care without carrying everything. Yes, you can actually care and give and be compassionate, empathetic without overwhelming yourself. And you got to have the boundaries because you want to understand how people feel, but you don't want to absorb what they're feeling. Notice the difference. Why boundaries improve intuitive accuracy. Because it does. When emotional information becomes overwhelming, it can become harder to distinguish what belongs to you and what belongs to someone else. Clear boundaries help maintain clarity. When boundaries are strong, you can observe emotional information more neutrally. Yes, You become neutral, non biased. You can notice patterns more clearly. You can respond intentionally. You feel less reactive. Who wants to be triggered all day? You feel more stable. Stability supports perception. It makes a huge difference. And that's what it's about, stability. It's like stability is bigger than saying somebody, is erratic or not erratic. It's really the subtle things. Are you being activated? Is your nervous system being triggered, activated, just from being around people? Can you manage to be around others? Yes. Clarity increases when the nervous system feels safe. Boundaries help the nervous system feel supported. Intuition often becomes clearer when emotional overwhelm decreases. That's the difference. Intuition often becomes clearer when emotional overwhelm decreases. That's why a lot of empaths can't, like, just, do readings for a long time. Maybe they could do one or two and they're like, that's it. Because I can't handle anymore. And if you're doing this for a living, which I've done for 24 years, you got to have ways to handle it, especially if you're working the phone lines, because it's call after call after call for a lot of us who work those lines. And you got to be able to separate out your energy. Signs your boundaries may need strengthening. We all can use this. I think it's a constant work in progress, boundaries, because they change, over time. You know what you need, as time goes on, and what worked in the past may not work now. You may benefit from stronger boundaries if you often feel emotionally drained after social interaction. You don't want to miss out on the parties and the gatherings, responsible for others, people's emotions. That's a lot. Your partner, your friends, your family, random people, clients, that's a lot to take on. Guilty when saying no. If you feel guilty when saying no, you've got a boundary problem. A big one. People go, but I'm spiritual, I'm a good person, I love everybody. You got a boundary problem. You really do, and been there. Overwhelmed and busy environments. Sometimes we can't avoid it. You can't, sometimes the airport's crazy. Even if you're trying to get to a peaceful island, you got to go through the airport. So you want to be able to manage yourself through this and mentally preoccupy with other people's problems. There are people like this where they are caught up in other people's problems because it's a way to avoid their own pain. And so they're like, I'm hurting. I don't want other people to hurt. I just focus on helping them. Mother Teresa did this if you read her diaries. When people get caught up in big sensationalized crime cases, a lot of times they're doing that. They're focused on other people's problems. It's like have empathy, have compassion, care, donate if you can, but don't let it overtake you. Pressure to respond immediately. Oh, when technology started with the cell phones and email, and people expect that. And it took time for people to realize, hey, I'm not just waiting for you to contact me. Life is happening. And I remember when I first got a cell phone, I thought I had to pick up the phone every time it rang. And I learned I can't do this. I won't get anything done. Exhausted after helping others. If you often feel exhausted after helping others, step back. This obsession with being good people and the peer pressure online of give more, give more. A lot of people screaming that aren't giving anything, but they're telling other people to give more. You don't know who's behind the scenes online and what's their drive for their behavior. Don't get caught up in that. And if you're sensitive to criticism, don't be, especially if you're going to work online, you cannot be sensitive to criticism because The people who are spewing stuff online are very troubled, that are picking fights and starting negativity. They are in a bad, bad place, and you don't want to be affected by someone who needs to heal their own stuff. And karma take care of that situation. But sometimes you have to fight back, but don't get caught up in somebody criticizing. They don't know you. They know what you show online, but they don't know you. I post a lot of stuff about myself online, but that isn't all of me. So, if you are affected by mood changes in other people, like when people go, "Well, I don't want anybody upset with me. I don't want to make them angry." That comes from childhood too. That comes from way, way back. It really does. And these experiences are common for intuitive people, but they are not required for intuitive development. You do not need to feel overwhelmed in order to be perceptive. Healthy boundaries allow sensitivity to remain sustainable. That is important. Healthy boundaries allow sensitivity to remain sustainable. Do not forget that. If you want to survive, you're going to have to learn a way to have boundaries. So let's talk about the types of energetic boundaries. Boundaries can exist in several areas. Emotional boundaries, number one, recognizing which emotions belong to you and which do not belong to you. That is the number one thing, especially if you're going to be doing readings or Reiki or any of this healing stuff. You have got to know what's your stuff and what's the client's. You gotta. You can't project your stuff and you don't want to take on their stuff. You may notice I can understand how this person feels without needing to take responsibility for changing it. That's an energetic boundary. Time boundaries, allowing time for rest and recovery. Sensitivity often requires integration time. Space helps the nervous system reset. Time, rest, recover, self-healing, self-regulation time. 3. Communication boundaries. Choosing when and how to respond. You do not need to respond immediately to every message or request. And if people get upset that you're not responding right away, that's not your problem. That's their issue. That's their trigger. They got to figure out why they're upset that they're not getting an immediate response. That comes from somewhere deeper from them. Okay, and the last one, environmental boundaries. Choosing environments that feel supportive. Reducing exposure to situations that feel consistently overwhelming. Boundaries do not create disconnection, they create sustainability. The past few years, I had to walk away from a lot of environments, and it's hard to do because I still care about the people, but it wasn't supporting me emotionally and spiritually to be in those environments. And I had to walk, and you might have to do the same. And for a while, it may mean isolation as you do the energy change and bring in people who support your and who you are, and it's a healthier environment. But it needs to be done. You can't allow people to keep on draining you because they have their stuff that they got to work on. And you could be compassionate and care about what people are going through without letting them deplete you. That was a big lesson for me to learn. Simple ways to strengthen energetic boundaries. You can begin strengthening boundaries gradually. You want to do it slow, get the rhythm of it, feel it out, let it settle into your body and mind. Small adjustments often create meaningful change. Examples of small adjustments and of boundary changes. Pausing before agreeing to request. Just sit with it. You don't owe anybody immediate yes or no, even if it's bugging them. But those triggers of being an empath make you think, I gotta respond right away. No, you don't. Say, I need a moment to sit with this. Gotta see if this works for me. Allowing time to consider decisions. I have a 24-hour rule. I don't make quick decisions, And I tell that to when people try to sell to my business vendors, whoever. And when I'm making a big purchase, I sit with it for 24 hours. And some people have not liked that. And I said, it isn't about what you like, but this is my life. And I have to live with the outcome, not you. So I'm going to take 24 hours, whether you like it or not. That is very important. Take some time. Develop a time rule. Spending time alone to recharge. Some people are afraid to be alone. It's very triggering. It's traumatizing for some people. Find out why, because being alone can be wonderful. Sometimes time flies when you're alone too. It feels so good. And limiting exposure to draining environments. You got to do it. You got to do it. Noticing when your body feels fatigued. That doesn't mean keep going or keep on grabbing coffee or tea or monster drink or whatever. Step back a little bit and say, why am I running on empty so much? Giving yourself permission to rest. A lot of times when we have trauma that we don't want to face or we don't want to face ourselves, we keep busy. People are just on the go all the time. You're like, do they ever sleep? They're traveling here, there, and everywhere, and with this friend, and later that one, and this one. And you go, what is social life? But sometimes they're doing it because they're running from themselves. If they sit in the quiet, they may get triggered. So if you struggle with rest and sitting in the quiet, find out why. What is going on beneath the surface? And reminding yourself that you are not responsible for fixing everything. I used to feel it. I brought it on myself. You probably have done that too. And there are some people who will do that until they need to stop, or the universe will force them to stop. And that's what I tell people. You may not stop on your own, but the universe will help you. The universe will help you stop this pattern. It will come one way or another. And awareness supports boundary development. Awareness supports boundary development. Isn't that a beautiful statement? I like that statement. You do not need to change everything at once. Small changes support stability. Many people worry boundaries will reduce connection. No, but boundaries often improve connection and make for better ones because interactions feel more sustainable and sensitivity feels supported. You can remain present. You can listen more clearly. You can feel less overwhelmed. You can maintain emotional balance. Boundaries create structure for awareness. Structure allows sensitivity to feel safer. Intuition often feels clearer when emotional capacity is protected. Yes, you can remain present. You can. You just listen better when you have boundaries. So, boundaries is what it's about for the sensitive person. And doing somatic healing and nervous system exercises and vagus nerve toning because the vagus nerve is tied to trauma. And these things will make a difference. Yes. So let's close this out. Sensitive people, hello, sensitive people, often need strong boundaries. You got to have them. Everybody needs them, but sensitive people, you better have them. Not because sensitivity is a problem, but because sensitivity processes more information. Boundaries help you remain open without becoming overwhelmed. You do not need to close yourself off from the world. You can't just hide and stay in a house. You can create supportive structure for your awareness. Boundaries support and protect sensitivity so intuition can remain clear. That is very important to remember. Boundaries protect sensitivity so intuition can remain clear. These are things that I teach in the Embodied Healer Collective. I used to call it the Embodied Psychic Portal, but I wanted to include all healers because everybody needs this. If you're doing healing work, you need nervous system regulation, you need boundaries, you need to prevent burnout. Even if you're not working professionally, doing this work, and you're in other capacities, outside of the woo woo world, you need this. If you're working as a healthcare professional and you're a sensitive, you need it. An attorney at Starbucks, you need it. You need to regulate your nervous system, whatever you do in life, because it is all important. Everybody's career keeps society moving. So every career is equally valuable. And just interacting with family and friends, and this is all so needed, and it has become my passion. I will have a link to the Embodied Healer Collective below, but I want to thank you for listening. Have a great day, and I will see you in the next episode.